Jury selection for a high-profile murder case wraps up in less than 2 days. Here in Arizona, 16 jurors will now decide if Lori Vallow Daybell is guilty of conspiring to commit the murder of her fourth husband, Charles Vallow. And little do they know, she's already been convicted of killing her two youngest children and plotting the murder of her romantic rival in Idaho. Vallow Daybell takes on the state of Arizona, representing herself in Maricopa County Superior Court. We're learning much more in the Doomsday Murder Trial. I'm Justin Lum, and we are on the record. The time has come. It's been nearly a year and a half since Lori Vallow Daybell was extradited from Idaho to Arizona on charges of murder, conspiracy. Opening statements for her first of two trials set for April 7th, 2025. We're just days away. Fox 10 investigator Justin Lum here, joined by Special Projects executive producer George Obi, and we have got a marathon coming up, don't we? Probably the wildest quote from jury selection for me. I don't know about you. Lori telling jurors that they're basically here to protect her from the state being the prosecution and the judge. She had a lot to say, and Judge Boreski had to clarify this to the jury. It's the state's burden to prove their case and prove that she is guilty, which is convincing them that Vallow Daybell conspired with Alex Cox, her brother, to kill Charles Vallow, all to obtain $1 million, and so she could be with her lover, Chad Daybell.
We're going to see a lot of this in the trial, where she either loses her train of thought, noticeably doesn't understand what her role is as her own attorney in this. This will be a common theme for her. Again, outside of her element, right? Like, this is not something she's accustomed to. She said it to the judge a few months ago when she was, trying to convince him that she could defend herself. She made mention she's been through two trials. She's studied family law.
True.
She's briefed herself on what she needs to do. But then, when you put her out there in the element, clearly she is in over her head a little bit.
For sure.
How much that will affect her, we'll see. But again, very common theme.
I mean, I can't believe it's been 5 years now, because she was arrested in February 2020. Who knows when exactly she started studying case law, and obviously she's had experience watching lawyers in the courtroom. But when you're actually doing it, that's another thing. And our ears, all of us in the courtroom, specifically the press, perked up when she said, "You're basically here to protect me." We're like, wow, did she just say that? But 5 things that we learned in court this week, or that were at least solidified. Number 1, breaking down the jury. 13 men, 3 women. A lot of people have had reaction to that online because that's a majority of the jury being men. Here's what we know about these jurors that I found a little bit interesting. The alternates will be determined after closing arguments. The ages of the jurors, they range from people in their 20s to probably in their 60s or so. We know one of them has sat on a jury before on a criminal case, but that reached a plea deal. I don't know how much experience that person has. Is there a chance that the 3 women in this box are not in the final 12 because there's a lottery? And does Lori think she has a better chance of swaying these men throughout this process?
This is, and for those that watch trials religiously and follow, high-profile cases, this is one of the most important parts of a jury trial is finding the right people. I do find it interesting. I was shocked when they narrowed down the field, and you would think that you would want a mix of both. Again, I don't want to look at her previous trial and say, look, there's some similarities in this, but 13 men. And again, only 12 of the 16 are going to decide her fate. But 13 men looking at a case like this, I wonder, again, depending on what is presented as evidence and what witnesses say, I would, again, not being an attorney, I would be a little concerned if I were her that the fate of this case lies with that many men. And as you mentioned, the age group. We'll ask Ben Taylor. We'll ask a lot of our guests as we go throughout the next 6 weeks on this case.
We could have 12. We don't know. The lottery will tell us if we have, at the end of closing arguments, we have 12 men sitting on the jury, and if they will feel any sympathy for her, or will they side with Charles Vallow, who we know tried to get Lori Vallow Daybell help time and again, months leading up to his murder? Now, Special Prosecutor Rachel Smith told me earlier this week that Lori definitely engaged with men that were potential jurors with just body language and facial expressions alone, and she was feet away in the courtroom, but she noticed this as a prosecutor during that 2023 trial in Idaho. Number two, thing that we learned, gun owners in the jury. Interesting. 10 of them raised their cards. Now, we're in Arizona. This may not matter to some people, but the state definitely made sure to ask 17 potential jurors in the box if any of them owned guns, and none of them had a problem hearing about gun violence or gun-related incidents. And we know that this case ends with Alex Cox shooting and killing his brother-in-law and claiming self-defense. We've heard this narrative in many Arizona cases. I mean, we cover the news. Self-defense is something that happens. Many people are going to use their Second Amendment right, and it's a constitutional carry state. So I don't know if we're necessarily surprised at the gun owner number.
I don't think so. I think anybody, and again, I looked up this stat in Maricopa County alone, how many gun owners there were just in Arizona. You mentioned, I think the last data that we had from a couple of years ago, 46% of people in Arizona estimated to own a weapon of some
sort. It's accessible, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think it's uncommon. I also don't think that part of the case is going to be a key component in all this, especially if Trina K and if they're presenting their case. I wonder, outside of the gun used, we know there was a bat involved. I don't know, unless they're setting this up for the next case, I don't know how that would play into it. And again, we talk about these 16 people. I would assume if they don't own one, they know somebody that does, and it may be a small piece of the case as we move forward. Yeah,
but definitely a pointed question and something that was clearly brought up for a reason by the state. Now, we know Alex was an avid gun owner. He'd been to the gun range many times, according to what we learned from authorities and prosecution, especially that year in 2019. I think the prosecution was curious to know how they would react to him pulling out this gun after this alleged fight in the Chandler home that Charles was paying the rent for. So it wasn't like Alex lived there. He brought the gun, stayed the night previously, and how they react to the narrative that Charles had hit Alex in the head, in the back of the head, with a baseball bat. Former baseball player Charles Vallow. And now there's a big contradiction here, I think, as we're going to learn through the evidence from Chandler Police. I'm glad that I've kept what I call nuggets from the case files. This document comes from a police report we got in the big dump a few years ago or 2 years ago. It's been a long time, involving what investigators learned from Zulema Pastenes, that's Lori's former sister-in-law and Alex Cox's widow, and I showed you this earlier, but I have this highlighted. Lori told her, being Zulema, that they needed to use all of the elements, water, fire, lighting, I'm assuming that's lightning, etc., to get rid of Iplos, and we know that Charles is identified as Iplos and Ned Schneider and these dark spirits. Lori would often tell Zulema that she had been told to try new things to try and get rid of Iplos next. Zulema recalled one time Lori was at her house and they were talking about getting rid of Iplos. Lori stated that this was so hard and complicated. Lori was laughing and told Zulema that maybe what she needed to do was put a bunch of his medication in his water. This is coming from police. Right there, first paragraph. What if you're the jury, what are you thinking?
Again, if you're trying to establish premeditation,
conspiracy.
Yeah, exactly. What better way than to hear from someone who is so close to all of them? And as we would learn, Zulema would get much closer to Alex later on. But yeah, that will it won't. If you're a juror, that doesn't take much to understand that kind of conversation. And I would assume when we get to this point in the trial, they will have already established Lori's motives when it comes to her views on religion, dark spirits.
Yeah.
I know that gets gets a little complicated for people. Even some of the jurors in the Idaho trial that we heard from afterwards, they were struggling. Yes,
it's so bizarre.
Yeah.
And even if this jury was asked, can you deal with us discussing religion, the church, LDS, Jesus Christ, Latter-day Saints, Mormonism, but this is a whole different ballgame, what they will be introduced to. I assume that the prosecution would bring this. Another excerpt. Zulema was asked how she found out about Charles's death. She indicated that on July 12, 2019, that's the day after, Alex and Lori called asking if she would come over to Lori's house. Zulema agreed and went over to meet with them. When she arrived, Alex opened the door for her, gave her a hug. He invited her in and told her that Lori was in the backyard. They went into the backyard and Lori was laying on one of the pool chairs. She stated that Lori was very quiet. At this time, Lori told her that Alex shot Charles yesterday. Now, he said that he got injured, getting hit in the back of the head with a bat. But Alex says this. During this time, Alex told Zulema that it was impossible for Charles to have this much strength during the fight. He told her that he held Charles from behind and Charles flipped him around like a pancake. Alex told Zulema that he shouldn't have been able to do this if it were only Charles. Lori then told Zulema that there were 100,000 dark entities that came to assist Charles and he had supernatural strength. Zulema asked Alex how he was doing after shooting Charles. Alex told Zulema that he was okay because it was a zombie that he killed.
Now, again, this is keep in mind, all of this was a day after the shooting, right? So, and you're going to see it in the body cam, Lori's demeanor. Now you're describing her demeanor, Alex's demeanor, a day after the shooting in the same house where the fatal shooting just occurred.
Hanging out poolside.
Right, hanging out poolside. Again, the shock. I don't know. To me, that says a lot. That picks up a lot. And keep in mind, Zulema is really the only person still alive that has a close knowledge of everything that happened that day. The jury, I would imagine, is going to pick up on that pretty quick. It doesn't take much.
Yeah. All right. Number 3, legalese, something LVD is definitely not fluent in. We talked a little bit about that because this is still new for her. She had trouble phrasing her questions to the jurors. She got stuck at times, very awkward at sometimes to watch. She paused, stumbled, and it seemed like she was trying to lead the jurors with her questions. Judge had to step in multiple times, as we know, and clarify what she may have meant. But she wanted to know if she does not testify or have any sort of defense, how will the jury react? And if the state does not prove its case, will they assume she's automatically guilty, in her words?
Well, and we saw this in some of the hearings, at least the most recent hearing, how frustrated she gets, how easily frustrated she gets with some of the things that she feels she's entitled to or owed, or oftentimes attorneys have to keep their cool, especially in front of a jury. I am very interested to see how that plays out. She's going to run into roadblocks. The judge is going to have to, help her in a way without giving her legal advice. Again, as we saw in the hearing, but those tense exchanges that we saw in some of these earlier hearings, I would expect you're going to see that again with her in the trial. And that's, again, look, I don't care how, 10 years, I think she told him she studied family law for 10 years. This isn't a family law case.
Yeah.
This is a criminal case.
We're seeing her struggle right now.
Yeah.
And here's one of those exchanges with Judge Beresky regarding the witnesses that she wants to call, but no one's been subpoenaed. Take a listen.
I've done everything in my power as a defendant to prepare the state and to give over everything that I could do within my power, with the limitations that I am an incarcerated person at this maximum security prison jail.
So when you say...
And I shouldn't be able to represent myself because of that fact? That negates my constitutional right?
I didn't say that. All right. I said that sometimes there are reasons to not go forward to trial as fast as you want.
Number 4, who will the state of Arizona call to the stand? So we've got the list, and I think everybody's interested in knowing, so they're ready for it. Zulema's not one of them. Total of 21 people. Let's start with Chandler PD. They have the most witnesses, of course, with 10. Daniel Coons, retired officer and a firearms expert, I guess, according to the state. Nathan Duncan, lead homicide detective. He was at the prosecution table for all of the 2 days of jury selection, so he's very much involved in this. I see Marissa Francisco, Jason Hunsacker, Robert Crothheim, retired, William McDonald, retired, Nathan Moffitt. He was a former lead detective on the case before getting promoted, and then Duncan took over. Ariel Werther, Erwin Wierzbicki, not sure if I'm saying that right. Finally, Cassandra Yinklan, who was the detective that interviewed Lori Vallow Daybell after the shooting. She was sitting in that room with her, and I believe she spoke to Tylee Ryan as well. Now, Chandler Fire has 2 witnesses. Kent Keller, Scott Cowden, Department of Public Safety with one, Jeff Moberg, Office of the Medical Examiner, Dr. Derek Baumgartner. I'm sure he's going to testify on how exactly Charles Vallow died at the scene and the entrance of those gunshot wounds, because that's very important to know if the self-defense, or was he, like police are going to tell us, on the ground while Alex finished him off allegedly with that second shot. So all this very important. I want to keep giving you these names. Office of the Inspector General Mark Sari, he testified in the Idaho trial. That's regarding Social Security benefits. And another very important one, Banner Life Insurance, Robin Smith Scott, custodian of records, because Charles Vallow's life insurance policy is at the center of this, according to the state. Civilians, there are 5. Christina Atwood, former friend of Lori's. Adam Cox, her brother, who spoke in depth with police after the shooting, knew about Charles's concerns. Nancy Jo Hancock saw Charles the night before he was killed. Serena Sharp, another former friend of Lori's. And finally, Kay Woodcock, third trial for her, Charles's sister, biological grandmother of J.J. Vallow. And the importance of Kay here, I think. I mean, someone trying to figure out what happened to her brother after all this, out of state, putting together the pieces, and her grandson goes missing. She's huge.
She is huge. And I think for those of you who are maybe, following this a little late, say in the last, 2 years with what went on in Idaho, it's important to remember that Kay, at least in my opinion, Kay was the one person who I think you and I spoke to early on in 2019, or at least early on in this saga. She was the one calling everybody saying, look, something's not right. She was the one who, after her brother was was shot and killed, I think she deserves a lot of credit, at least drawing more attention to the case. We've talked a lot about how police handled this initial shooting and the impact that this shooting had on the rest of the saga, the children going missing. Kay has not only been an important part in all of this from the beginning, but in these court cases. You and I are both. You and I both talked to her a lot, but I think you and I are looking forward to seeing how Lori questions her on the stand and how that
it's
interaction
going to be
goes.
tense.
Yeah.
I mean, these two, that's what you call sworn enemies. I mean, we're talking about murder. Her grandson was murdered by the woman she entrusted to adopt, a special needs boy, 7 years old. And she wanted to just get in touch and FaceTime with JJ for weeks in the summer of 2019. Doesn't even know that he's been moved to Rexburg, Idaho, and he dies within a couple weeks. He's murdered and then found on Chad Daybell's property in the summer of 2020. And then it was a tough spot for her because that was her sister-in-law. She loved Lori. And Charles, when things were going bad and they were separated, estranged, he was confiding in his sister and then tells her that someone's trying to change the password to his life insurance policy via phone and hacks it. So that's why he changes the beneficiary, because things were going south. Lori Vallow Daybell, according to Charles and according to police reports, was talking about being a translated being in all of these concerning statements she made towards Charles. So Kay knew that something was wrong. Would she ever predict that Charles would be shot and killed? No. And after that, she's just trying to pick up the pieces. Can't even get JJ to the funeral for Charles.
But as we know, Charles clearly saw the writing on the wall at some point, feared for his safety, was concerned for the children, was concerned that, as we saw on some of the body cam, that he even said it to, several people, that if something happens to me, you know what happened and who did it.
It went from trying to get her help to, okay, if I'm dead, I need you to look at these people. And then he predicts it, the people that are involved, or at least at the scene of the crime, innocent until proven guilty. And if Alex was here and alive, he'd probably be charged as well, because he's the one who pulled the trigger. Number 5 here, Lori's witnesses don't want to testify. Maybe we're not surprised about that. I mean, family dynamic is not good for her. The people that Vallow Daybell noticed in her witness list do not want to be involved. Her own mother, sister, nephew, and brother. And we saw her mother and sister at one of her hearings, and there was I didn't see much eye contact. They were there to watch and they were out. They didn't want to comment. They were the ones that initially defended her when the kids were missing. And now they've gone through all of this, and so no one wants to testify. No one has even been subpoenaed. Nate Eaton of East Idaho News just got out of testifying by fighting against her trying to notice him and put him on the stand. And so this has been very interesting.
I think this would be, I don't want to say easier, but I don't think that this would have been an issue had this trial happened before the Idaho trial. Because everything that happened, and that's just with Lori's Idaho trial, Chad's Idaho trial as well after that, I think she would have had better luck getting some of these witnesses maybe to testify on her behalf. But yeah, I don't know how she's going to kind of, get around the fact that, the jurors are going to notice right away that nobody wants to testify on her behalf. And especially in this case, the people that would are no longer with us. Or the people that would have a benefit to her or help her case in some way, they're not around.
Yeah, she wanted her daughter statements included from that interview with Chandler Police. Her daughter is a murder victim of hers,
Right?
And so the state took that on and handled that, and they're not going to have Tylee's statements, and Alex's may be case by case, based on body camera footage, and his claim for self-defense. We'll see how that works, but here's what Lori had to say to the judge about trying to get these witnesses subpoenaed. She's blaming it on the limitations she has in jail. Take a listen.
Your Honor, I understand that, and I am limited in what I can do. If I could call these people myself, they would answer my call probably, and I could have this discussion with them. But I'm going through the limitations that I have at the jail through my paralegal who's working overtime and my investigator who's working overtime to try to do everything to help me prepare for trial, as they have other clients as well that they have to do things in a timely manner for. So we are doing the best that we can.
So expert witness Lonnie Dworkin, as you said, worked on the Jodi Arias case, correct?
Yes, he did.
Digital forensics.
Yeah, he was called in as an expert during that case. Yeah.
Well, he had no disclosure for the state at the time of the hearing that we watched. So he got precluded. I mean, the judge said you wanted a speedy trial.
Yeah.
This guy's not prepared. It's not necessarily his fault. So she may have no witnesses at all. And we're talking about a 6-week trial. I mean, maybe it's not a 6-week trial now because the state presents its case, some cross-examination, and then the big question is, well, what does she have left? Does she take the stand?
Well, if you get to a point as a defendant, you could go either way on whether, your lawyer would recommend you take the stand or not. We're going to see as the trial goes on if Lori feels like it's in her benefit.
Mm-hmm.
We've said this before. No matter what happens in this case, she's going back to Idaho to spend the rest of her life.
Yeah.
So I guess as a defendant, your mindset is I have nothing to lose. Why not? But I have personally never seen a defendant represent themselves, but also take the stand. And as you've mentioned before,
Totally unique.
Yeah, she has to, and the judge reiterated this, she has to do it in a certain way. It has to be questions. The judge made it very clear. You're not going to come up on the stand and give a speech. You're not here to try and sway the jury with your testimony. You need to have a list of questions for your co-counsel that will then be asked of you, and approach it like you're a normal witness, and then of course be cross-examined. I guess we could go on for hours about whether we think she will or not. I believe that decision, personally, I think that decision has not been made and will be made as the trial goes along, because her co-counsel will tell her, look, you're not in any position to help yourself at this point.
Yeah.
By testifying on your behalf.
And then what she has to do in order to testify is have questions written out and have her advisory counsel read them to her. They've been busy. We've seen her confidence level go up and down. She turns to them a lot because they do know what they're doing, but they also can't lead the way for her either. They're basically on the sideline there to answer questions that she has. But she did allude to the fact that she might not say anything at all and how the jury would react to that. Because if you take that stand, I mean, you've got a seasoned, experienced prosecutor that's ready to tear your story apart and cross-examine you. And once she asked her about why she didn't call 911 when Charles was shot or when the fight got heated, why she left the scene, I assume that they would show surveillance video of her at Burger King with Tylee and JJ. I would assume they would have the tracking of her going to Walgreens and not coming back for an hour. And I assume they would show body camera video of Lori Vallow Daybell smiling to an officer and laughing, knowing that
Yeah.
something terrible has happened. I mean, how do you answer to that?
Well, and remember, she didn't testify in her Idaho trial either, probably for good reason. So
And maybe she wanted to. Maybe she wanted to, but she had an
Mhm.
actual team of public defenders that may have said, don't do it.
Yeah.
We might not find
Well,
out.
and the audio, there was audio played, a phone message between her and her friend. She was questioned about why didn't you tell police where the kids were? Why,
Yeah.
again, this was all, or why aren't you telling the police where the kids, are? I think that audio recording went a long way in determining whether she was going to testify in Idaho in that trial. The body camera video that you mentioned, they're going to lay out the timeline of everything she did during and after the shooting. Zulema and
The
her
call
interview.
to the life insurance
Yeah.
company as well, right after
Right.
the shooting.
I mean, you can say, look, people, the shock value, and some people react differently when a loved one is shot and killed. I'm not sure. Again, the jury is the jury, but I'm not sure that you're going to be able to sway them in any way when you have this much evidence. Because again, what's the motive, right? Money, life insurance. I don't know. She will need something, and maybe that's her testimony on the stand. She will need something to try and convince them that that this was not anything more than again, self-defense, a matter of two men getting into a fight, family squabble. I do hope she takes the stand. I know that Kay is probably hoping the same thing. We've always wanted to hear her side of the story. This may be the opportunity for her at least to explain, what she thought of her husband at the time anyway, being shot and killed by her brother. We'll see. I don't know.
Yeah, and the only family members, like you said, that are still alive have not seemed very willing to testify on her behalf. Now, Adam Cox, her brother, will be testifying on behalf of the state. Will he be called by the defense? They were close. But speaking of family, we had a chance to talk to someone who was in the courtroom for a couple of days, a relative of Lori Vallow Daybell's. Take a listen.
It's definitely different to hear her speak and to try and sort of ingratiate herself to the court, and also to try and present clear, thought out arguments when she's not an attorney. She doesn't really know what she's doing in there. Not hearing her speak during the entire Idaho trial until she gave her allocution statement was, I don't know, it left a lot to be desired. There was a lot of questions that I had after that was all over with, and the allocution statement was the wildest thing I've ever heard. So I was full of a lot of anger after that statement. Now that I realize that that's sort of the narrative that she's had the whole time, and I understand where her mentality is at, it's a lot easier for me to sit and listen to this, because I know where she is, I know what's in her mind, and I don't have to really wonder why she's thinking the way she is.
And here she is, Megan Connor, the cousin of Lori Vallow Daybell. We just heard what you had to say there outside the courthouse after the first day of trial, right? And basically, you said that Lori doesn't seem to know what she's doing at all, and you weren't surprised at how she got fired up that day because this is the person you know. I mean, you have a lot of experience with her. Just what are you absorbing? It's been a little while now since the first 2 days of trial.
Yeah, I've had a couple of days to process a little bit, and it's been interesting, the things that have stuck out to me. And I think more than anything else, what I see happening, and this may be reiterating what I've said, but Lori has used a certain set of tactics throughout her life to try and get her needs met and to get what she wants. And that involves charm, and it involves her looks, and it involves a little bit of manipulation, right, through the way that she speaks and the way that she interacts with people. And I think what she's finding out now is that does not work for her anymore, especially not in a court setting where she has rules about what she can and can't say.
I think this part we just talked about was interesting yet not surprising. the witnesses that she wants to call, nobody's been subpoenaed. No one has interest in testifying. We're talking about family members, her own mother, her sister. I don't know how often everybody talks in the family. I'm sure everything's spread out. Everyone's been impacted by this in some way. But what is the vibe that you get from the aftermath of this whole saga and how people in the family have been left?
Well, if you want to put a visual to it, it's sort of like, dropping a bomb in the middle of a city, and there's just rubble everywhere, and everybody's disconnected and confused, and I think our family is like that in a lot of ways. A lot of us have stayed connected with each other and continue to talk to each other openly about what's going on, and others have not. So it's been real difficult to understand, how everybody feels about this. I think we're all grieving and processing in our own ways.
You, again, you know her very well. Is for those that don't, and even the jurors, is this who Lori is, and what do you expect to see from her during this trial as she's trying to represent herself in this case? Very unusual. But is this the Lori that you knew, and what is the jury to make of all of that?
This definitely is the Lori that I knew. She, I see her using those same tactics that I've seen her use all the time, and getting fired up when she doesn't get her way. Belligerent, stubborn, those things. That is the Lori that I've always known. What's a little bit different is, of course, the setting that we're in, and it's very surreal to me to see her wearing street clothes, no restraints at all other than the rack belt she has to wear, and knowing what she's done and what she's been convicted of, and just seeing her walking around and talking with her attorneys, laughing and smiling as if nothing was wrong. And that's very on brand for Lori and for the family too, just to pretend like everything's wonderful and beautiful and we have no worries in the world.
So no accountability.
Right.
And we didn't see accountability in her allocution, obviously.
Right.
In Idaho, I mean, she still has doubled down and said that there were no murders that happened at all, even though she's been convicted of killing her own 2 children and conspiring in Tammy Daybell's murder.
Right.
What do you want to see come out of this trial that is focused solely on the man who loved her and wanted her to get some help?
Yeah, this is where it all started. And I think the hard part for me is, I never want to second guess professionals doing their job, but obviously there were some breakdowns in the police investigating it in the first place when this first happened. But I think for me, the most important part about this trial is to understand the involvement of all of the family members before, during, and after the incident happened, because there are always family stories and rumors and half-truths and everything. And I really just want to understand from the evidence to know, were they complicit? Were they trying to help cover things up? And I've heard family members say Alex was a hero at the time. And it's just heartbreaking to think that a little bit of accountability, and certainly Adam was trying to help out with that, could have prevented some future tragedies.
I mean, that's the what if question. What if Adam Cox was there? We know how much he knew because of Charles Vallow and his text messages that there was going to be some sort of family intervention. And like you said, Lori doesn't like to own up to anything. There was no way she was going to sit down and listen to these family members, the people who love her most, tell her, hey, you have a problem. The things you're saying, the affair that we know you're having, this is all very concerning. But to get to the point of a shooting, talking about life and death here, and it ended up being murder, I mean, that's a big, big reach. I don't think anyone predicted that. And yet you're saying here Alex was looked at as a protector, and good job.
Yes, and he had a pattern of committing violent acts against Lori's romantic interests. And so I think a little bit of looking into his background, and I don't know if the police saw his felony conviction or not before they released him. I wish they would have held him at least and done some investigation on that if they didn't. So there again, I'm speculating because I don't know what's been done, and this is what I'm hoping to find out in the trial. What happened? Where did it go wrong? Who was involved? Just because it helps answer those questions in my mind that are still kind of lingering.
Do you Do you think we talked about this earlier? The fact that she is struggling to get any witnesses. Do you think she will take the stand in her own defense?
From what it sounds like, from the questions she was asking the jury, it sounds like she doesn't want to, because she's asking the jury, are you able to find someone not guilty if they don't testify? She said something very telling. She said, it's in our nature to want to hear both sides of the story. And if you only get one side of the story, if the state, presents their case and they don't make their burden, are you okay with finding someone not guilty, not knowing both sides of the story? So I think the signs point to that she doesn't want to testify. I think the reason for that is that she knows she'd be subject to cross-examination, which probably won't go well. And since she's not allowed to just tell a narrative, she has to submit the questions in advance, and it has to be one of her attorneys to question her. And for Lori, that means losing control of the whole situation. And that's really what she is about, is trying to have control of everything that happens.
And she wasn't in control in Idaho. She had legitimate public defenders that were taking on the case on her behalf, and we didn't hear much from her at all. And so when you talk about control in this whole relationship between her and Chad Daybell, who's on death row for killing her children, and Tammy Daybell, who was in control?
That's the question everybody wants to know, right? Who was in charge? And I think we got the answer in Chad Daybell's trial when we heard some of the audio recordings of phone calls between the two of them and with the two of them together, where there was a little bit on both sides, right? It was a little bit of coaxing from Lori and asking Chad, what do you think about this? And I can see her sort of making him think things are his idea, asking him leading questions to try and get a specific answer. And that's the type of manipulation she's always done.
Yeah. I know you have experience with her in your guys' younger days in Texas, living together. I mean, she was your bridesmaid, right? I mean, you guys were so close. With that type of life experience and that history, did you guys make eye contact this week? Was there anything? Did you want to? I mean, what do you think she was thinking as she turned to look? Because she's always looking at who's there.
Yes. She always wants to know who's in the room. And so, I knew that at some point we were going to make eye contact. She was going to know that I was there. And I was a little bit anxious about how she was going to respond to my presence, because I don't know if she knows how closely I've followed the case and the commentary that I make on my podcast and things like that. So I just didn't know. And the first time we met eyes, there was no recognition. It was almost like I was just another face in the crowd. But the next time, she definitely knew who I was. And after that point, for me, that question got answered, and I didn't need to have her attention anymore, so I just didn't pay attention to her anymore after that, and I really just have zero emotional response to her now.
So it was more of locked eyes, and you just know that she knows, and vice versa.
Yep.
Now, for her, the experience is she's had this happen to her many times. Mother, sister, uncle, different relatives, her own son. I mean, they've been in the gallery. So she's dealt with that and seen, okay, that's someone that is in my family that I'm very close to, and they're watching me in this situation. Do you think she even cares with what's happened? Is there shame? Is this just hidden by that the image she gives off?
I don't think there's any shame. I really don't. If anything, I think she probably wonders what I'm doing here. And I don't know. I can't speculate anymore, because the Lori that's there right now is not a Lori that I know. It's a delusional Lori. It's a mentally ill Lori. She's an evil monster. And so I can't pretend that I know what she's thinking anymore. But somebody who was sitting with me did point out that some of her team were taking glances at me, trying to figure out who I was. So to me, it's apparent she maybe talked to them about who I was, and I don't know what the outcome of that was. If she was trying to figure out if I'm a friend or a foe, I don't know.
So this is the personality but the transformation is someone that you have not gotten to know, and that is the convicted killer. Yeah.
Can I ask you what your first thought when you heard that she had requested to represent herself in this case?
I was totally unsurprised, because I know she was unhappy with her representation in Idaho, and I also know her just her tendency to think that she's the smartest person in the room. And I think she probably observed those proceedings and observed her attorneys and said, oh, I can do that. I can do that better than they can.
Yeah.
So what's the plan? You're going to be in the courtroom for all of this?
For as much as I can. I have a lot of personal celebratory things going on a little later in the month, and some things are up in the air. So I will be there as much as I possibly can. Right now I have plans to be there next week and the following week, and after that we'll just have to see.
And it was cool to see you more. You were in the front row or near the front of the gallery, and you had your laptop. You looked like you were a reporter in the courtroom. You were taking notes. You know what? Obviously, we know what's in the notes as far as the day that went on, but what stands out to you in your notes?
There were a couple of moments that really stood out to me a lot. And one was when she got up to question the jury and she began to introduce herself, and the judge had to stop her and say, "We're just asking questions right now." And the next time was when she basically portrayed it as it's the state against me, and it's your job as the jury to protect me, and the judge also shut that down. She's not able to get out the kind of narrative that she wants, playing the victim and asking the jury to protect her, those types of things. There was one really poignant moment, though. She began a question, and then she sort of stumbled over her words, and she looked down at the podium, and she said, and took a long pause.
Long, yeah.
And in that moment, I think we all started to see the very first cracks, and her mask slipped. And the Lori that is deeply insecure, that is underneath all of that manipulation and all of those tactics, that's what we saw in that moment. And I think we're going to see more of it, because this is the first time that she is publicly going to fail. We've already seen her fail. A lot of her motions have been denied, and she's going to fail over and over again in this process, and I think it's going to wear her down.
And we've seen that in the first two trials. I mean, we're talking about experienced lawyers that are worn down. They are burnt out by the end of it because of all the testimony, direct examination, cross-examination. I mean, it is a lot of work, and she's going to put this on herself. And I think we've already seen her lean on her counsel a lot and look to them for advice. What would you say about Judge Justin Boreski and your evaluation of him so far?
I absolutely love Judge Boreski. I think he is balanced and fair. I think he's been very patient with Lori. I think he has given her an opportunity to have some leeway. There were some times when her arguments were just thin and made absolutely no sense, but he really made an attempt to understand the problem and work it out, and I really appreciate that about him. We want her to get her fair trial. We don't want her to have any grounds for appeals, and I think he's handling it beautifully, and I love his sense of humor.
There are times where he could have gone off. I mean, we've seen judges do that. It's not like it happens in this world, and he's kind of taken a breath, and he has this sort of monotone, calming voice and just responds to her, well,
not taking the bait, right? Because there's been a few
Right.
times she's thrown it out there, the interaction, and like you said, she gets frustrated, plays the victim card. He didn't seem to bite. Even in the hearing that we had the other day, he could have very easily gotten short with her, and to the point of, look, I've reiterated this several times. I've told you, you waived your right to speak. Like, there were times when he could have given it right back to her, and he did not.
Right, he's very even-keeled. And we did see him get frustrated with her. You know, I've explained it to you 5 times. I don't know how else to explain it to you, but
Yeah.
he never really rises above that middle ground. You know, he's very even-keeled, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, he says, I can't give you legal advice. You
Right.
wanted the speedy trial. Your former attorneys wanted to continue this, and even your current counsel says they'd probably need like a year and a half or something. And so the clear indication is she doesn't want to be in a straight jail for another year and a half, right? I mean,
Right.
she'd rather go back to Idaho, I would assume, and serve the rest of her time. But she also, I know a plea deal wasn't offered, but I mean, this all could have been resolved. But I think it's that pride and that ego that we've seen just even with the convictions,
Yeah.
even with the downfall, there's still, right? Like we've heard people say no remorse.
Right.
And it's evident. And last thing, fun fact, Judge Boreski went to law school at the University of Idaho.
I didn't know
There's
that.
always this weird connection. There's
Yeah.
this Idaho, Arizona connection,
Yeah.
and then he came here after law school. We know he'll be on this trial. We'll see how long he lasts on the second trial, presiding on that before a rotation, I believe it is. But Megan, thank you so much for your time,
Yeah.
being an insider for us because of the experience you have, and I know you'll be in the courtroom, and we expect to talk to you soon about this crazy saga.
Yeah, thank you so much, and I'm always going to say thank you for, you gave me my first interview when I first started speaking out about who Lori really is, and so I appreciate that, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to talk it out.
Yeah, thanks for giving us the chance. That is it for us. Opening statements on Monday morning. Get here early, subscribe, and hit the bell. For Fox 10 Investigates, I'm Justin Lum.